I've been wanting to get a Huawei on this channel for many years, and I finally managed to get one. But this isn't just any Huawei, since it's a pretty special smartphone, as you'll see. In this video, I'll tell you what my first impressions have been after testing this Huawei Mate X6 for a few weeks. Although I can already tell you that I thought what would surprise me the most were its screens, but in the end, it turned out to be its cameras. You already know that I bought a Vivo X200 Ultra to use it personally. They claim it's the best camera phone worldwide. Check my channel for the review, but here's a sneak peek at the surprise. On a stormy night, I took several photos with both phones to try to capture the lightning from the storm. Well, the Vivo X200 Ultra always ended up choosing those photos where the lightning didn't appear. Let's just say it's quote-unquote because of its processing. But to my great surprise, this Huawei took much more natural photos. And in these extremely difficult conditions, better than what is supposedly the best smartphone in the world when it comes to photography. And what's more, look at how this Huawei is able to record in slow motion in such unfavorable lighting conditions. Truly impressive. And this was just the beginning. In fact, it was only the second day I was testing this Huawei. But the surprises continued, and not all of them were pleasant, as you'll see in this video. What's it like to have a Huawei nowadays? Is it really worth it? Well, you're already seeing, for example, the case that comes in this unboxing. It's absolutely high quality. It also comes with a stand that can rotate 360 degrees and is quite useful. And it's probably the most luxurious leather feel case I've tried on this channel. It would also come with a USB-C to USB-C cable. And now, here you have the Huawei Mate X6 in all its glory. It weighs less than 240 grams, has a thickness of 9 millimeters when folded, and only 4.6 millimeters when unfolded. And yes, it's a foldable phone, and I know that on this channel I said I would never use a foldable phone again, especially because of that bad experience I had with a Samsung Galaxy Fold. Few analysts actually dare to speak badly about Samsung these days. But what has changed after so many years? And especially with this brand that I think is underrated. Something I didn't like is that the crease in the middle of the screen is still noticeable. However, when you're watching content, as you'll see later, it's barely noticeable. It's most noticeable with reflections and when the screen is off. Even now, no foldable smartphone hides the crease completely. The hinge is extremely solid, very robust. It also has a kind of magnet that feels premium when you open or close it. There's a sort of click. It's made of aerospace-grade aluminum as well as so-called vegan leather and extremely durable glass. I also like that it hasn't given in to the trend of flat frames. These are rounded frames, which makes it much more ergonomic. At the bottom, there are two microphones, a USB-C port, a speaker, and a card slot for 2 SIM cards. On the other side, there are 2 buttons that are really small, but the travel is very solid. Also, you'll see later that the fingerprint reader is probably one of the fastest I've ever tested on this channel. And at the top, there's the second speaker, which sounds great in stereo. You'll hear it later. There's also an infrared port and the third microphone. And on the other side, obviously, there's the hinge. And this is how it would feel in your hand. Really ergonomic, not excessively heavy. However, the camera module is really big. And I'm not surprised after seeing the camera section it has. Not just what you saw with the storm, but also what's coming next. Before making this video, I thought I'd start by discussing the screens. But after trying out its cameras, I'm sorry, but I have to give them first place. A 50 megapixel main camera with a variable aperture from f1.4 to f4.0, a 40 megapixel ultra wide angle, and a telephoto camera which can also do macro with 48 megapixels. It also includes an ultra chroma camera, and the 2 selfie cameras it has are 8 megapixels. But of course, there's a way to take selfies with the main cameras. I recommend it. And also, since it's a foldable phone, It has certain advantages when you leave it at 90 degrees. As you can see, digital zoom up to 100x. But above all, the camera app software itself and the camera itself with that ISP, that is, with that image processing from Huawei. I personally use a Vivo X200 Ultra as my phone, and honestly, it blew me away, literally. Also, when it comes to photo editing, it's one of the most complete I've seen on this channel. And the artificial intelligence when it comes to erasing, for example, just look at how fast it is. And not only that, but it also highlights for you. As you can see in that box at the top left of this Huawei Mate X6, it precisely shows you where you're marking so you can remove certain objects from the photos that you don't want. All right, let's move on to the samples. The camera module sticks out a lot and is really big. This smartphone also has a major flaw I'll mention later, which I honestly don't understand. But when it comes to the photography section itself, there's very little to criticize. And especially considering that it's not a smartphone, let's say focused, or the most photography-oriented one from Huawei. Let's say this one has other strengths. Even so, you can already see the colors, the sharpness, the natural look. Plus, it's able to take photos by default at 24 megapixels, just like, for example, Apple iPhones do. The dynamic range is amazing. And considering that the zoom is only 4x in quotes, it has also really surprised me. You can see how well that zoom works. Above all, I guess it's because of the processing. This brand, Huawei, is so experienced. But look, for example, at this wave. To capture this wave, it has to do it very quickly. Also, that day the sea was very rough, there was a lot of sand. And look at the precision with which it captures the sand in the water. Notice that fineness, that detail, which you can see perfectly. All the sand particles in the water in this shot. By the way, I'm going to post the best photos, as I always do, on my channel, on my Telegram, so you can download them in the highest resolution. You can see for yourselves what this Huawei can do, even though it's supposedly not the most photography focused. I'll leave you a link to my Telegram below in the video description so you can download the best photos. But you're also seeing the macro shots. They're amazing. Not just the flowers or how close it can get, but also the details like this insect. That iridescence, the tiny hairs it has, even on its own leg. How you can see the reflection, it's really incredible. And that's why I decided this point should be the first thing to highlight about this smartphone. Also, in low light, as you can see, this church was very dimly lit. You can see it does an excellent job. Huawei has significant experience in this area, especially with low light situations. And now, let's move on to the video section. Although I should tell you in advance that the day I recorded these videos, there was really hurricane-like wind. First video on this channel with a Huawei. This is how its stabilization would look and how its microphones would sound on this foldable phone. And this is full HD resolution at 60 frames per second. And this would be its maximum resolution at 4K at 60 frames per second. Honestly, the screen looks perfectly fine. Even in broad daylight, there are no reflections. And this is the ultra steady mode. It records at 2.7K up to 60 frames per second. That said, it's quite a windy day. I'm not sure how the microphones are picking up the sound. I assure you it was really windy today. With other smartphones I tested, for example, with an iPhone and with the Vivo X200 Ultra that I use, you could barely hear anything because of the wind. But I think it's only fair to show you a part of a video recorded without wind, so you can really hear how its microphones capture sound. Subscribe. And now, let's move on to the most obvious feature of these phones, which, since they're foldable, is obviously the screens, the two screens. First of all, I have to say that the glass is much more durable and doesn't scratch as easily as Samsung's, including the camera module. And the brightness of both screens is truly outstanding. We're talking about 1,800 nits on the unfolded screen, which is 7.93 inches, and 2,500 nits on the folded screen, which is 6.45 inches. Both screens, by the way, go from 1 to 120 Hz, and both have a PWM of 1,440 Hz. Thanks for paying attention to this point. I also like that the whole open, unfolded screen setup is extremely customizable. And also, both have HDR Vivid, and of course both feature LTPO OLED technology. Their resolution, in both cases, is over 400 pixels per inch, which makes everything look really detailed. And whether you're watching YouTube videos you've made, or ones you've recorded with this Huawei Mate X, or even watching movies or series on the small screen or the big one, you choose. It's really an outstanding experience when it comes to multimedia. Obviously, whoever buys this type of foldable screen is looking for a kind of hybrid between a smartphone and a tablet. And also, as I mentioned, when you're watching multimedia content with the screen unfolded, you don't really notice the crease in the middle unless it's getting direct light, like the reflection you're seeing right now. The quality in terms of colors, brightness, and so on of both screens is simply outstanding. And now let's get to the most critical point, the most negative aspect I've found with this Huawei Mate X6. Take a look at this. When I connect these headphones to the USB-C, this appears. The USB-C port on this device does not support analog audio devices. For those of you who, like me, enjoy audio, this is really a very negative point, and it's something related to software. Please, Huawei team, fix this. Make it compatible with audio devices. In fact, this is a negative point that I haven't seen mentioned in any other video about this Huawei. This is likely the first time you've heard about this issue. But luckily, since it's a software issue, Huawei could enable the audio system to make it compatible with any audio device connected through USB Type-C. And now, let's move on to the audio test. Above all, I liked its stereo sound. I think it's really well done, especially for watching videos on the unfolded screen. It's something that's really nice to have. And now let's move on to the next section, which I also liked and found very surprising. It's about the software and hardware of this Huawei. First of all, the fingerprint sensor. As usual, foldable phones have it in the side button. Also, it's probably the fastest side button fingerprint sensor I've tested on this channel so far. And I love Huawei's animations, for example, when opening or closing the smartphone. That interface that somehow links to the wallpaper, honestly, looks really good. In addition, it has an extraordinary range of customization options. It's all laid out really well, turning this device into a multimedia tool that's almost like a pocket PC. And above all, obviously, taking into account its multitasking capabilities. Everything works extraordinarily smoothly, not only because of those 120 Hz, but also because of its 12 GB of RAM, 512 GB of internal storage, and the processor, which is an octa-core, the Kirin 9020. It's not the fastest in the world, it's actually 7 nanometers. But even though it's not on par with the most powerful ones on the market today, I haven't noticed anything strange. Even everyday apps have worked perfectly for me, like Instagram, for example. You already know that Huawei devices don't come with stock Android, but you can download any app from the Play Store without any problem. You can use any app like Gmail, Google Maps, WhatsApp, Instagram, any app without any problem. And I'll even tell you more. I think it's a more refined, more European-style system, you know what I mean? Compared to, for example, my Vivo X200 Ultra, which I use as my personal phone and which is less polished. It has some little things in the software that still haven't been translated into Spanish, for example. That won't happen to you with this Huawei Mate X6. The vibration motor works very well. The GPS signal, it has 4G and I haven't had any problems with data, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, etc. Everything has worked perfectly for me. Also, it has a passive cooling system, which means that, for example, if you're playing any game, it doesn't get excessively hot, even though it's extraordinarily thin. Also, playing on this screen, which is almost like an 8-inch tablet, is amazing. Not just because of the visuals, the obvious, what you're seeing, but also because of how it sounds. And linking it to its thinness, it has a 5110 mAh battery. In fact, that's quite a bit more than the latest Samsung Galaxy Fold. Additionally, it has 66W fast charging and supports 50W wireless charging and reverse wireless charging. It also has several modes to protect the battery, including one that limits charging to 80%, for example. Of course, it's still a foldable phone, especially if you're going to use the unfolded screen. It will last you the whole day. And if you're not one of those people who use the phone too much, or especially if you're going to use it with the smaller folded screen, it can last you 2 days without any problems. And well, let's get to the most important point. How much does this Huawei Mate X6 cost? Well, as you can see, it used to cost almost 2,000 euros, and now it costs 1,699 plus. You have it in 2 colors, and as a gift, you get 3 months of screen protection and the Huawei free clip earbuds. I'll include the purchase link further down in the description. Obviously, it's a much more affordable price than other foldable smartphones from the competition, especially considering that camera system with its spectacular camera module, featuring an octagonal metal frame that's not only big but also takes amazing photos. I'll leave them for you on my Telegram so you can download them in high resolution. So, what were my first impressions of this first Huawei I tried on my channel? I was really looking forward to it. Well, at first I was very skeptical, especially coming from a Galaxy Fold, but I ended up really excited about it. Not just because of its screens, which are much more durable than the ones Samsung uses, but especially because of its camera system. Considering that I was able to compare it directly with the Vivo X200 Ultra, I was very pleasantly surprised. It does have its flaws, as I already mentioned in this video, especially that incompatibility with certain audio devices, but honestly, considering the software, the interface, and so on, this Huawei has left me with a really good impression. And with that said, I hope you enjoyed this Huawei video. Without a doubt, it's not what I expected. It surprised me in a good way. And I hope it helped you discover this brand in a different way. Subscribe if you haven't already and leave me a like so I can keep recording in these amazing landscapes, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and see you soon.